NASA's Artemis program, a 1,300-year-old hotel in Japan, the McLaren F1 racing team, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Hell's Kitchen, Coldplay, and the clan mothers of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Now you're probably all wondering, have they replenished the real coffee yet? 'Cause that decaf shit ain't it. But you're also probably wondering, what on earth do these 6 entities have in common? 3 things, it turns out. The first is that I love the fact that they exist, and I would feel absolutely honored and privileged to write a reference letter for any one of you, my fellow leaders, my loved ones, to work with and for any of the aforementioned 6 entities. Everyone except perhaps 2 people. Not because I don't love them, not because I don't respect them, quite the opposite. I think, frankly, they would make terrible employees. These 2 individuals possess lackluster communication skills. Far from AI literate, they're technologically incompetent. They are mercurial and prone to outbursts. They take frequent bathroom breaks and never clean up after themselves, and you've probably already guessed they are microhumans. These are my twin babies. That is Isaac on the left, and that is Nora on the right. Isaac in Hebrew means he who laughs, and Nora in Arabic means divine light. A little bit of light and laughter, 2 things that I think the world could use a lot more of right now. They are being raised by 2 heart-first, human-centered leadership researchers. And by any means necessary, they are going to become leaders that you would love to work with. They are going to believe that you are an end unto yourself, not a mere means. They are going to believe that you have inherent worth and deserve dignity. They are going to believe that you are fundamentally good. Consequently, they're going to expect the same. They will only thrive in environments with leaders and cultures that care for them, that nurture the light in their eyes, and treat them with the same respect that would be afforded to the organization's highest important paid person. And we should all want the same for the young people in our lives. We should all want this for posterity. Which brings me to the second thing that the 6 aforementioned entities have in common, and perhaps the reason why I love that they exist for my kids. It is because they are shining examples of high-performing teams of leaders. They are paragons of distributed and decentralized styles of leadership. And the third thing that I find to be the most fascinating is that they're all hoping for the exact same miracle. Over the last decade, I have spoken to tens of thousands of teams and leaders around the world, and I've asked them a single question. What is the miracle you're hoping for? If everything went your way, if you had all the resources in the world, if all lights were green, if you could wave a magic wand and make something come true for the next generation, what would it be? And I would love to ask you, PDW 2026, the same question. If you could wave a magic wand and make something come true for the next generation based on the work that you do today, what would that look like? The next generation will be what? And you can go and scan that QR code. That'll take you to Slido. You can also go to slido.com and enter in the code 1161292. Okay, here we go. They'll be safe, respected, no taxes. I love it. Let's think big. They'll be empathetic, end wars, free, fulfilled, without the orange man. Okay. Fix climate change, great thinkers. Public sector information professionals, I was not familiar with your game. You're actually hoping they will be 1161292. I understand that we are fast approaching quantum, but my goodness, I don't think I'm ready for cyborgs yet, but okay, balanced, world peace, uplifted, housed, thriving, smarter, beautiful. And I can't quite make sense of the emojis, but I'm glad you tried anyways. For the most part, it seems like what we want to be true for the next generation based on our success today is for them to be happier, to be safer, to be freer, to be kinder, to be more healthy, to be more peaceful, so on and so forth. And I love this. This is a world, this is a Canada that I want to live, work, and play in. This is a Canada that I want my kids, Nora and Isaac, to live, work, and play in. And what I find to be most interesting about the answers that you've put up here on the board is that they map perfectly onto the findings from the Global Flourishing Study, the largest and most comprehensive study of its kind conducted, led by the likes of Harvard, Baylor, Gallup, with contributions from Oxford and our very own U of T, all designed to ask over 200,000 people over the last 5 years, spanning 22 countries, what constitutes the good life? What does it look like to flourish across time and tradition? And the answers have distilled themselves down to 6, 7, I tried, it was a lot funnier when I practiced it this morning. The answers have been distilled down to 6 or 7 dimensions which constitute flourishing. And I would love to share them with you on the next slide, but ask you to rank order them in terms of the most important to your life right now to the least important. So go ahead and rank these dimensions of collective flourishing from the most important to the least important in your life right now. I feel like I'm watching a race. This is very interesting. Not as much movement as I thought there would be. And that's not a bad thing. So I feel like some themes have crystallized for us, but what are you noticing about these rankings? What stands out to you? I heard some rumblings. What is it? Work is last. Yes, work is last. So, my friends, we have designed a world where we spend most of our time, energy, and attention on the thing that is least aligned with producing collective flourishing. What I find very interesting about this is that, yes, we know what we don't want immediately, but we are also very clear on what we want. It was right there at the top. We want happiness and life satisfaction above all else, followed by mental and physical health, meaning, purpose, so on and so forth, all the way down to work and career. So we know what we want. And I believe that the leaders who have access to these insights also know what we want. And that begs the question, are we getting what we want? And more disturbingly, do the leaders who have access to this care about what we want? I'm a word nerd, and my favorite word in the English language is zeitgeist. It is exactly 19 points in Scrabble. Great use of the letter Z as a hinge. Zeitgeist means the general moral, intellectual, or cultural climate of an era, the spirit of the age, what it feels like to be alive. I'd love to ask you, PDW 2026, what does it feel like to be alive right now? If you could describe the current zeitgeist in one word, what would it be? Chaos, scary, stressed, nervous, uncertain, distracting, greed, expensive, shifting, horrific, despair. Oh my goodness. This is an overwhelming word cloud. Tough, sad, velocity, weird, boggling, big orange man. Oh man, as a cause or an effect, right? So if PDW 2026 were to publish the word of the year, I think it's safe to say it would be anxiety, followed by a smattering of chaos, challenging, overwhelming, fear. We get the point. Every year I wait, oh, by the way, I'm surprised I didn't see Labubu up there. I think that these demonic Teletubbies, these gremlins are the perfect symbol for the end of times. Every year I wait with bated breath for the world's largest dictionaries and linguistic societies to publish their word of the year, which is actually our word of the year. When you think about how it's collected, they scour the internet and look for the most repeated words. They then collect, and then we upvote them as an added layer of confirmation. So in this way, words of the year are like supermetrics. They're the best reflection about how humanity feels at any given time. Let's take a look at the most recent selections for word of the year, shall we? At number 1, we have a worthy successor to brain rot. 6-7. Okay. Next up, brat. Rage bait. AI slop. Parasocial, which means one-sided psychological bonds where a person invests emotional energy, time, and interest into a person who is unaware of their existence. Sounds like the worst boss ever. Polarization, understandably. Social media ban. Raw dog. Did you think you were going to see that on screen at PDW 2026? And one of my new favorite words, kakistocracy. What is that? Good question. A system of government led by the least qualified, most unprincipled, or worst citizens. This is going great. And my new favorite word, N-shitification. Let's double click on that one. N-shitification means the gradual deterioration of a service or product brought about by a reduction in quality and as a consequence of profit seeking. Air Canada, no, sorry. That wasn't the punchline, but I'm saying if you've been on the phone recently with Air Canada customer service, you are familiar with N-shitification. I'm playing. My brother works in L&D over there, and Azim, do better. My friends, you know shit is bad, pardon my language, when we are using words like raw dog, kakistocracy, and N-shitification to describe our shared reality. And so is it any surprise now that hope has emerged as the #1 need for the world's employees according to a landmark survey by Gallup? We now want hope more than trust, stability, and compassion from our leaders because we're disillusioned. I read a report last week from Inc. saying that we're in another great paradigm. We are now in the great rollback where many leading organizations once thought of as forward-thinking and progressive are slashing things like PTO, work from home, and the thing that is most heartbreaking to me, they're slashing parental leave, including IVF treatments. And this is disheartening, especially when you consider Gandhi's assertion that a true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable. And I don't think collectively we're doing a good enough job. We're disillusioned. And we are unfortunately becoming more and more miserable. According to the World Happiness Report, a companion piece to the Global Flourishing Index, Canada is slipping in global rankings for world happiness. We are now behind some developing nations. In fact, we rank among the lowest for youth unhappiness. Youth unhappiness. Sorry, we're the highest in youth unhappiness, among the highest. And when I asked one of the researchers and authors of this publication, Dr. Felix Chung, why this is the case, he gave me a one-sentence answer. He said that it's because today's leaders are not thinking about tomorrow's leaders. They're not thinking about the youth of today who are the leaders of tomorrow. And this is all culminating into people growing frustrated. According to Edelman's Trust Barometer, over the last 10 years, we have seen a decline in trust across every major institution, corporate, media, non-governmental organization, and government itself, unfortunately. In fact, according to the most recent Trust Barometer, 40% of people now believe in hostile activism as a legitimate way to get what they want. And if you saw the ways in which people were taking pickaxes and flamethrowers to Drake's ice sculpture just to get a release date, it's a microcosm of what we're all feeling right now. In fact, 61% of people have a sense of legitimate grievance against institutions. You know things are bad when we've pissed off Dr. Jane Goodall. The renowned late Dr. Jane Goodall is one of the most beloved public figures who ever lived. I think she's right up there on the Mount Rushmore. It's her, it's Tom Hanks, it's Mr. Rogers, it's the Pope, it's Miss Rachel, and it's Sean Paul for some reason. I don't know why Sean Paul came to mind. And she used her last breath, her last interview, to deliver a scathing indictment of the great men atop these institutions. When I saw this last year, I thought it was AI slop. I couldn't believe it. I was scrolling on Instagram and I see this clip branded with Netflix, and you can actually watch this interview. And she's asked by the interviewer, "What do you think about Elon Musk building a spaceship?" And this was her response verbatim. She goes, "Well, I hope he boards the craft himself, and I hope he goes off to whatever planet he hopes to find and never returns." And then she continued, she crashed out, "I hope he takes his cronies with him. I hope he takes Trump. I hope he takes Putin. I hope he takes Xi," and she names a bunch of world leaders and says the same thing. "Leave us, return to source so we can figure out collective flourishing without you." You know things are bad when Dr. Jane Goodall is frustrated. So back to the question, are we collectively flourishing? Now this seems like a rhetorical question, doesn't it? Obviously not. But why not? It's because of the man with the plan, or lack thereof. And whatever man and whatever plan just popped into your head is a totally valid thought. Our collective flourishing is blocked, unfortunately, by men that are unhealed, unskilled, and unaligned. And it breaks my heart as somebody who identifies as a man to say this before my fellow men. But we have to do better. And I'm tired of talking around this, so let's engage with this idea head on. Let's get to the root of the problem. In 1840, humanity took a wrong turn. We took a detour, and we have been paying the price ever since. In 1840, a Scottish historian by the name of Thomas Carlyle published a book called On Heroes and Hero Worship, which was the red flag all along. And in this book, he made the assertion that leaders are born, not made. His exact words were, "History is but the biographies of great men." That was my best attempt at a Scottish accent. I won't try it again. Oh, thank you. Look at that, you know. History is but the biographies of great men, and the rest is bloody history, because this titillated the British Empire, and like I said, we have been living in its aftermath ever since. What Thomas Carlyle effectively did as a historian is he enshrined positional leadership, this idea that leadership is conferred by the position that you have, and he framed it as individual-centric. Now, this idea was taken. Oh, by the way, you might think that was a long time ago, Hamza. That's fine. I understand that, 1840, but in 1927, riddle me this, at a conference just like this, a supposedly great man stood before other supposedly great men and advanced the following definition of leadership. Leadership is the ability to impress the will of a leader on those led and to induce obedience. And that person was Anakin Skywalker. But it might as well have been. It was actually the president of AT&T who then published a book called The Function of Executives. Now, you might be thinking, Hamza, that was one human being ago. Fine, let's bring it into the present moment. I'm going to ask you all a question. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A symbol, a structure, a framework, a reference point that I imagine most people in the audience are familiar with. By a show of hands, how many of you were taught this in school? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Almost everybody. What if I told you that everything we were taught about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is patently wrong? At the very least, it's flawed. For starters, Maslow never envisioned it as a pyramid that you had to move up in a scaffolded way. He actually envisioned it as a ladder, and you could have your hands and feet on multiple rungs simultaneously. You could be unhoused and still self-actualized. And then along came Maslow's peer by the name of Douglas McGregor, best known for his work on the Theory X and Theory Y approaches to management, autocratic and human-centered. Ironically, he wrote a book called The Human Side of Enterprise, and he was titillated by Maslow's work when asked by executives for how best to motivate employees in a workforce. And so he misapplied Maslow's work, and here we are. In a half-assed apology letter to Maslow, several years later, he wrote, "The implications of your self-actualization concept not only made sense to executives, but fired their imagination because of its implications in industry." And what we have been doing ever since this curriculum seeped into the likes of MIT, Yale, Harvard, and clearly in all of the curricula that we have been exposed to, what we have found is that people have been optimizing for 3 subclinical traits in a zero-sum environment predicated on the false idea that humans are motivated by greed and fear. We are all trying in a short-term way to get what we want by operationalizing and maximizing the dark triad of personality. And if you don't think you have dark triad traits, consider how you got this job. Consider how you got this job. There's a very good chance that you had a LinkedIn profile, you had a really good resume, you told a really good story about yourself. You know who's really good and successful at telling stories about themselves? Narcissists. And then you had to convince a bunch of people to like you, and then to see things your way. You know who's really good when it comes to strategizing socially? Machiavellian types. And I'm not saying that you did, but if you exaggerated or lied in any part of this process, congratulations, you're here. But you know who's really good at that? Shutting off empathy? Psychopaths. So at some level, everybody in this room possesses subclinical dark triad traits, and we work very hard to keep a lid on it because, unfortunately, if they are fully expressed, we will always produce this structure. The most unnatural structure in systems, in societies, it is known as the toxic triangle, where we rise to the top and we exert our will from the top down. And this style of organization always fails, as teams, as organizations, as systems, as society. It always fails. And look no further than the global Fortune 500 list. There's only one company since its inception that is alive today. In fact, the average age of a company in 1920 was 71 years. Today, in 2026, it has shrunk to 15 and is continuing to slip. So what we have now instead is degenerative leaders producing degenerative outcomes for people, planet, and the next generation. And unfortunately, we know it's going to get worse. The devil is quite literally in the data. Every year, Gartner surveys approximately 4,000 senior leaders, executives, VPs, directors, and above, and asks them to identify their top priorities and then rank them in order from most important to least important. I would love to ask you all right now to put yourself in their shoes. Better yet, don't even think like them, think like you. What is the most important priority? What should be a leader's top priority? And use the terminology interchangeably, right? When they're saying customer, we're obviously thinking the public. Workforce, end user, growth, corporate risk and resilience. Another clear theme is emerging. I think we understand the assignment. It's to put people first. To put our workforce, to put our colleagues first, and to put the end user first, 1A and 1B. It will dishearten you to know how executives around the world, according to Gartner, have ranked their top priorities this year. Number 1 is growth, followed by finance, technology, corporate strategy and structure, and there we appear. The first time humans are explicitly mentioned is in the second half of the list. We are becoming a distant afterthought in the minds of leaders. And don't even get me started on the fact that this year, the environment was completely lost as a priority. It was a priority for the last 10 years, but now it's not even on the list. Customer and workforce, there we are. And so now we see the problem clearly, don't we? We know what we want. It is so clear. You made this so clear to us at the beginning of this presentation. And we know what leaders want. And there's a great divide between the two. They either don't know what we want, or worse, they know and they don't care. But either way, we need a miracle, and we need a miracle fast. We need to hit fast forward on a style of leadership that many of us have been thinking about for a long time. I call it fellowship. It is the dissolving of the real and perceived barriers that exist between leadership and followership. Take it from the father of leadership studies himself, James McGregor Burns. Leadership is followership, followership is leadership. A leader without followers is just a random person on a walk. Fellowship is where we want to go. And if the terminology is getting in the way, think of this in terms of high-performing teams of leaders. And all of you, irrespective of whether you have somebody reporting into you or not, are all leaders. You all, at the very least, led yourselves to be part of this conference. You have demonstrated the ability to, at the very least, lead yourself. So, where do we go? Understand first that this is not requiring an understanding of a new style of leading. It's a remembrance of what we forgot or were made to forget. And what we were made to forget, unfortunately, is that the great man, the great women, and all the great people who emulate that archaic style of leadership must return to the source, must return to the greater many. We have to move as quickly as possible from the me paradigm to we, to us, to all, and one. The most common resistance to this style of leading is twofold. Number one, we don't know how to do this, which we'll address shortly, and we lack the capacity and resources, which we'll cover off at the end. To enact a fellowship model, start by doing this. Start with the me imperative. Start by treating yourself like someone worth taking care of. I think the modern paradigm, late-stage capitalism, whatever you want to call it, produces a sort of mania, a schizophrenia that makes you forget that you are somebody worth taking care of, that the light in your eyes, the light of creativity, the light of purpose, the light of productivity, the light of passion must be kindled. And we are going to get to a place very soon where everybody in this room will be responsible for tending to your light, but we need you to hold on to it for the next couple of years until we can figure this out at scale. I think that an organization that demonstrates this at the highest level, and all of these case studies are interchangeable, they can be applied to any of the imperatives, is NASA's Artemis program. They're all operating at 100%. The Artemis crew left our home Earth to find other homes for our species in the stars. Everyone has to be completely synchronized for this moonshot literally to work. This is only possible because everyone is on the same page. Christina Koch, one of the astronauts, said it best. A crew has the same cares and same needs, and a crew is inescapably, beautifully, dutifully linked. I love that. The first imperative action that I have for you is to burn bright and not out, to tend to your human spirit by prioritizing your personal, professional, and academic development as you are doing right now, and simultaneously optimize your energy and become unyielding in optimizing your energy. We can all optimize and manage our time, we can all optimize and manage our attention, but what about energy? Energy is the capacity to do work. Think of your energy as divided into 4 layers: your physical energy, your mental energy, your emotional energy, and your spiritual energy. The doctors who advanced the concept of burnout used burnout very intentionally as a metaphor. Humans as energy systems that gain or lose energy. So when you start thinking of yourself in those terms, the idea of burn bright, not out becomes quite clear. Do everything in your power to care for yourself, and once you do this, the real work begins. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was never meant to end at self-actualization. In his last writings, Maslow talked about a grand concept known as self-transcendence, to leave the self altogether and to start thinking about others. And now we move to the we imperative. The Nishiyama Hotel in Japan is the world's oldest surviving business. Until 2017, I believe, it was owned and operated by the same family for 52 generations, and only recently has transitioned into the hands of a new custodian. How is this hotel able to resist the entropic drift that capsizes most organizations? How is it able to resist and transcend, I should say, multiple evolutionary barriers? It's because care as an idea is in the DNA of the organization. None of the owners, operators, leaders, managers think of themselves in those terms. The language that they use is custodians. They think of themselves as caretakers of a great institution, of a great heritage. And I think this is very apropos given the theme of our gathering. They see themselves as people with a responsibility for taking care of something, themselves, others, their teams, their organization, the society in which they operate, and the systems that hold them together. Take a similar approach with the work that you do. Care for others. Become the custodian of light in other people's eyes and help them to tend to their fire, whatever that looks like. And the only way to do this is to upgrade the default operating system that we drift back to during times of change. We all know about the dark triad of personality, but you also possess light triad traits, the inverse. You believe that people are ends unto themselves and not mere means. You are all about empowering people. You believe that people are deserving of dignity and have inherent worth. You can build confidence in others, and you believe that people, despite what you see on social media, are fundamentally good. 99.9% of people all want the same thing. And the 0.1%, they just need a big hug. They really do. You have a positive mindset towards others. In sum, cherish the light in other people, start by seeing it, and be of service to others in the way that the custodians of the Nishiyama Hotel are to themselves and to us, the guests. And now the good stuff starts. Now that we moved on from the me and we imperatives, we start thinking about this constellation of care in the form of teams and organizations. I am a fair weather F1 fan. Never really watched F1, and the movie didn't do it for me either until my friend Callie, who runs Lotus Fertility, pulled me aside one day and she said, Hamza, you gotta start watching F1. It is productivity porn. And I was like, what a sentence, first of all, but let me see what this is all about. And I started watching F1 religiously, and I have not stopped since. I am now riveted because so much of an F1 team's success has little to do with the driver and the car. It has to do with the engineers. It has to do with the technicians. It has to do with the people doing the quality assurance testing. It has to do with leadership and culture. What you see on the track is but a symptom of all of that, the final expression of all of that. And I've become particularly obsessed with the McLaren F1 racing team because they have been in existence for half the time that the dominant team, Ferrari, has been around, and they're on track within the next 6 years to win the most constructors' championships, which is the team championships. And the reason why this is happening has everything to do with culture. Zach Brown is their CEO, not to be confused with the singer, by the way. Zach Brown, in every interview, repeats the same message. It's almost stereotypical at this point. He says, we win and we lose together. That's his refrain. And in the most recent interview, he said, we back each other up and we don't blame each other. This no-blame culture, I believe, is what has contributed to McLaren's success. Because unlike the other organizations that are over-indexing on driver, over-indexing on the car, and focusing on the great man paradigm, what Zach Brown has made clear is that everybody's success is inextricably tied up. When the individual wins, the team wins, and when the team wins, the individual wins. The driver doesn't win alone. The action here is to build shared fate, to anchor everyone in a transcendent purpose by diminishing the self-other dichotomy. And there's a really helpful way that you can analyze how secure you feel as a leader in your organization. It's known as the Penn-Baker test, Pennebaker. Simply take any email that you've written recently, take any script that you've delivered, and run it through an analysis of me, I, and we, they, and us, personal and group pronouns, and look at the ratio. And I did this recently. I took every major world leader, and I took Zach Brown's recent speeches, and I ran it through the Penn-Baker test. Sure enough, Zach Brown eclipsed nearly every major leader. The worst offender, obviously, was the clown down south, right? Just littered with I and me, and at times even used galvanizing words like they, but implied the other, going back to this idea of the self-other split. An individual win in your team and your organization, your ministry, your department is a collective win. And now we move on to organizations, which are just collections of teams. I'm truly fascinated by the Ying Tao restaurant in New York. Ying Tao shouldn't exist. It is a Chinese fine dining establishment, Michelin-starred. And why it shouldn't exist is because in New York, Chinese cuisine is typically interpreted through the lens of takeout culture. But here we had a husband and wife duo who got together and said, we need to elevate the Chinese experience, the Chinese cuisine experience, by bringing people into the dining room that we experience with our grandmother and create that sense of care and wonder and make them feel at home and give them a ratatouille-like epiphany whenever they take in any bite into any of our delicious meals. For this organization to work, everybody has to be anchored by the same purpose. They were able to attract a executive chef from Daniel Boulud himself. Her name is Emily Yuen. She left her posting to join Ying Tao because she was drawn to this particular mission statement. We're introducing the genre of contemporary Chinese fine dining that reflects heritage, the present moment, and our identities. Everyone in this establishment, from the maitre d' to the people washing the dishes, taking out the trash, sous chefs, everybody is operating with the same why in mind. And it is inspiring them, it is galvanizing them. They feel equal ownership of this mission. The idea here for us is quite simple. Make a mission worth joining. Ensure that everybody can see themselves in the mission of not just our great country, but each of your individual departments, divisions, teams, and across the entire federal organization. And then become a broken record when it comes to repeating the mission. I used to work with an individual named Glenn Wepler, back when it was called Ryerson University, now TMU. And we would jokingly, and with the best of intentions, mock Glenn, because he would always repeat in every meeting, in every conversation, the organization's mission, its principles, its values, its vision, so on and so forth. I look back at that now, and I see that as a compliment. I would love it if my team were like, here Hamza goes again, repeating the mission, repeating the vision, because then it seeps subconsciously into the organization. And now my favorite of the two transitions that we make from me to all, the all imperative, care for society. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever seen Coldplay in concert? Okay, quite a few of us, a radically inclusive space, a brave space, if you will. Chris Martin, the frontman of Coldplay, does this thing in every show where he shouts out all of the countries that he can see flags of. People are holding up signs and flags, and he goes, Australia, I see you. Canada, I see you. Brazil, I see you. And cheers, cheers, cheers. And then he goes, Palestine, I can see you. Cheers. Israel, I can see you. Cheers. And in the most recent concert in Wembley, after he shouted out the Israeli flag, he heard a couple of boos. And you could see Chris Martin's eyes start to dart. He was like, this ain't it. This is not why I'm gathering people together. Later on in the show, he sees two ladies holding up a sign that says, we believe in magic. And he calls them up and he says, welcome, where are you from? And they say, Israel. And you heard the same boos again. And now Chris Martin is pissed. You can see it in his eyes. And you can watch this clip on YouTube. And Chris Martin decides that this is a moment to remind everybody why we're here at a Coldplay concert. Put his arms around them, brought them in, said, thank you for being here. I love you. I love that you're fans of Coldplay. Love your sign. Let's sing together. And then he looked out at the audience and said this, we are all from Earth. Every single person in that concert, in this room, we are all from the same place. How do you reach this level of self-transcendence and group orientation? The fastest, most easiest way is mushrooms. And I ain't talking shiitake, right? But I think the next best way is to express care at the highest possible level, which is as compassion, which derives from the French word that literally translates to suffer with. And understand that nobody is free until everybody is free. And on the flip side, nobody is truly flourishing until everybody is flourishing. Remember that our flourishing is inextricably tied up with each other. And now we move all the way to the final expression of care, and that is care for systems. And this is where I understand that a lot of people are scratching their heads going, I don't see how my work connects to this. Allow me to share an anecdote. Self-transcendence was never the goal. Maslow, his thinking was inspired by his proximity to, immersion with indigenous knowledges, specifically the Blackfoot Nation. And in their worldview, they don't see self-transcendence as the end goal. They believe that everybody is born self-actualized, spends their life achieving what? Community actualization. That is the end goal of all of this. I had the pleasure and privilege of serving as a fellow at Trent University, a global leader in indigenous business studies, indigenous leadership education led by indigenous faculty. And while I was there, where I'm currently completing my PhD at the same institution, I had the pleasure and privilege of asking several elders of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, of the Haudenosaunee tradition, of the Haudenosaunee clans and tribes, why it was that they were able to survive as the oldest participatory democracy on Earth. They are actually the inspiration for the US Constitution and have shaped most of Canadian Charter of Rights and the way that we work at a federal level. Fascinating. And they all pointed to the seventh generation principle that I imagine everyone in this room is familiar with. The seventh generation principle was explained to me through the following proverb. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. The action here is to elevate wisdom work wherever it exists. How quick we are in the modern intergenerational workplace to phase out those of us who have reached the end of a 65-year career. How quick we are to dismiss boomers and the aging Gen X and prioritize the needs of the next generation. But what would it look like if we could capture that institutional knowledge and add it to a wisdom layer in our respective teams? And I think the Haudenosaunee Confederacy does this the best. They have what's known as clan mothers. It's a matrilineal society, and every clan has atop it a mother or a grandmother, somebody who is intimately familiar with caring and expressing life several generations into the future, specifically 7 in the Haudenosaunee tradition. And if somebody is proposing a decision, an initiative on behalf of the tribe that doesn't align with collective flourishing, they can send them back to the drawing board, or worse, they can remove them. Now, how is grandma able to do this? Because grandma's connected to all of the other grandmas. And there's true strength in numbers. What would this look like? I imagine, we hire my grandma, Nanima, to be part of my company. And we ask her some questions. And we say, hey, grandma, we're thinking about attending PDW 2026. She would go, yes, good. That is the Indian, yes, good. Hey, grandma, I'm thinking about increasing my pay to $2 million. She'd be like, no, that's stupid, don't do that. That's too much money. And then I'd say, hey, grandma, we're thinking about slashing work from home. She'd be like, bad idea. How does this support collective flourishing? Hey, grandma, we're thinking about hosting a UFC fight on the front lawn. Take off her slip. Bloody degenerate, right? My friends, we've reached the end cycle of the great man. We really have. After 150 years of books and TED Talks and podcasts, please no more podcasts, and leadership education, we ended up with raw dogging, kakistocracy, and end-shitification. Let's just accept it's just not working, right? It really is. We've tried it the great man's way, it's not working. But I sleep very well at night knowing that the kids are going to be all right. Every year, Oxford University Press studies approximately 25,000 stories written by children, analyzes in nearly 3 million words to try to form a composite of what children are seeing as their future, and simultaneously to our shared reality as adults, this is what the kids are seeing. Peace, kindness, resilience, friend, laugh, game, play, love, hope, and fun. The dream of a better and brighter future is alive and well in the eyes of the young people that we are entrusted to take care of. The dream of a better and brighter future is alive and well in the eyes of the people that we are borrowing our current reality from. And whenever I see that list, I'm reminded of a quote by Arundhati Roy, author and activist, who says, another world is not only possible, she is on her way, and on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. And so the future that is coming, it is inevitable, is one in which the distinctions between leader and follower have collapsed into a single category. A world of fellowship, a world of high-performing teams of leaders. And I think that all of you right now are operating in environments that are microcosms of this future. So continue to express the value of care at the level of self, others, teams, organizations, societies, and systems. I have a few more minutes left with you, and I want to address the second form of resistance to this style of leadership, which is we lack the capacity and we lack the resources. Understandable. Know this, care is regenerative. The more care you give, the more care you express, given a wide enough time scale in a karmic way, that care will come back to you. How you care for each other is how you'll care for the people that are at the furthest end of your teams, your departments, your divisions, the people that are interfacing with the public of Canada. And that level of care expressed by you as leaders at all levels will find its way to people like me who live, work, and play in the country, and we will give it right back to you. Care is regenerative. But I also understand I'm speaking to some ferociously smart people who understand the moral imperative of this. But you're also thinking to yourself, yeah, care isn't everything, Hamza. There's an operational reality to what we do. Granted, I'll be the first person to say care isn't everything, but not caring can be. If you're skeptical, I get it. Allow me to share with you in the last 5 minutes a very personal story about what this means to me. My son Isaac was born through a very traumatic breech delivery because he was a twin, and so there's naturally more complications in multiples deliveries. And when Isaac came out, unlike Nora, he didn't cry. He didn't cry. He was actually stunned, he was limp, and he was silent. And what should have been a moment of true celebration became instantly tense and urgent. A doctor took hold of Isaac and began trying to revive him, but it wasn't working. It didn't feel like care. It felt very forceful. At times, it even felt violent. And for all intents and purposes, we're going to call this doctor Dr. Labubu. That's his name. I don't know his name. I don't want to know his name. I'm still mad at him, but eventually I'll get over it. Dr. Labubu manhandled Isaac. In the first 30 seconds of his journey earthside, he was flipped upside down, slapped on the back. He had tubes jammed into his nose, jammed into his mouth, all in an attempt to remove the amniotic fluid that he swallowed on his way out. Now, another doctor, a gentle female, suggested a more kind, caring approach. And Dr. Labubu snapped back. He said, I know what the fuck I'm doing. And I'm watching this like, what the hell? Is this really happening right now? And in that moment, sitting there, watching my son's very first interaction with the world, hearing the first words that entered his subconscious, I knew that something was horribly wrong. But I did what I had been conditioned to do. I trusted the system. I said, they know what they're doing. A few hours later, my wife Bailey and I had a short window with both twins. Isaac slept while nurses came in and ran a battery of tests, and I never really held Isaac. I told myself that there would be time later. But his breathing looked fast and his breathing looked very strained, and so I called for a doctor, and unfortunately, the only doctor working that day was Dr. Labubu. And we caught this guy on his way out, like he was half out of his scrubs, and he walks in and he looks annoyed. No pleasantries. He's like, him? Okay. Walks over to Isaac, touches him, draws some blood, presses his stomach a little bit, and he says, I see this all the time. He's perfectly fine. Don't even worry about it. Have a good night. Walks out. 15-second interaction tops. And I said, okay, I'll do what I always do. I'll trust the system. I accepted that. And not long after that, the nurses rushed in. And they told us that Isaac's blood work was deeply concerning and that he had to go to a place that I wish none of you ever go to, the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, the NICU. I pray that you never know the pain of looking at any child, let alone your own child, through that box. We masked up every day, we sanitized with industrial-grade chemicals, and we stared at our son, Isaac, completely helpless, being fed by tubes, breathing with a machine. He wasn't fully here, but he wasn't gone either. And slowly, his vitals began to decline. And now we were in one of the best hospitals in the city. They had the record for the best, the most twin deliveries, most successful twin deliveries in the world. We had every resource available. This wasn't an issue of money, it wasn't an issue of talent, it wasn't an issue of access. Yet nothing was working. And every time I walked into that NICU, I felt myself being deflated, feeling defeated. I felt the light in my eyes going out. I felt myself burning out every single time. In those moments, I realized that I, as the once great man of my little family, I wasn't showing up in the way that I thought I could, in the way that I wanted to. I was still very unhealed from past pregnancy losses. I was very unskilled in crisis. Despite how effective I am in my day job, I couldn't handle this. And I was completely unaligned with what my infant daughter, Nora, needed, what my wife, Bailey, needed, and especially what my son, Isaac, needed. In those moments, I accepted reluctantly that I am not a great man. Never was. Don't think I ever will be. With Isaac's light fading and my light fading, it was Bailey of all people who moved in closer. One night as she held Nora, she had a heartbreaking realization that when Nora opens her eyes in her home, she sees mom and dad smiling at her. But when Isaac opens his eyes, he sees glass, he sees wires, he sees harsh lights, he sees machines and complete strangers. And so she insisted on going rogue. She said, we got to bring our son back home. And the next morning, she went to the NICU before it opened and enlisted the help of a nurse, a fellow co-conspirator whose name was Mary Grace, of all possible names. And she said, we have to bring this boy home. This boy needs to come home, and we're going to make it happen. And she insisted on being able to hold Isaac. She said, open up this damn case. I'm holding my son. It's been too long. And she fed him, and she told him that he's loved and that he's cared for and that we miss him. And she comes back to me later that day and she says, Hamza, you're not going to believe this. In just a few hours, Isaac's vitals started to improve, and I couldn't believe it. I don't believe in miracles anymore. I don't believe in magic. I'm completely disillusioned. I'm frustrated. And she looked me in the eye and said, Hamza, you need to go see your son. If Isaac can't come home, you have to bring home to him. And when she said that, I understood what I had to do. I dusted myself off, and with what little ember of passion and life and hope I had in me, I fanned it and I walked all the way to that hospital, the longest walk, and I met with Mary Grace, who was absolutely delightful, and she opened the case and she removed the tubes from Isaac's nose and mouth, and she said, hold your son. Hold your son. He needs a human touch. And after what felt like an eternity, I touched Isaac. I held my boy again. And just like that, I started to believe in miracles and magic. When he opened his little eyes, and we looked at each other, and I felt his little heart beating and felt his soft breath, and I caressed his just cute little face, and I smiled at him, and I could swear he smiled back, and I sang to him, and I read to him, and I put his little paw in my hand, and I prayed with him, and I read to him, and I told him how much I loved him, how much I cared for him, and that if he couldn't come home, that Mom, Dad, and Nora were going to bring home to him. And within hours, I swear to God, he began to stabilize. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it as I'm sharing this with you on stage. His body softened. You could see the change. You could see the light returning, and Isaac began to burn bright again. The next day, Isaac came back home. And for the first few days, he was a little bit traumatized by the ordeal. He was throwing up gang signs and everything, refusing the bottle, being like, Mom, Dad, you abandoned me in the NICU. But we didn't give up. We kept on holding him, loving him, caring for him, hoping with him, and eventually we wore his defenses down, and he became the little boy that we know today. Smiling, laughing, happy-go-lucky, just grateful to be earthside. Isaac, he who laughs. Isaac's odyssey restored my faith and solidified my faith in the idea that the system only works when people like us care. Isaac came back to us not because of authority or expertise, nor because of the old system. He came back to us from people like Bailey and people like Mary Grace, caring enough about other people and then opening up that circle of care. And in a circle of care, in a constellation of care, many hands make light work. I'll say that again. In a constellation of care, many hands make light work. It begins with everybody caring enough to make a difference. And sometimes that means breaking from the old system and forming something more responsive, something more relational, something more emergent, something more human. So if you're ready, let's stop managing the old world and its raw dogging and kakistocracies and end-shitification, and let's start leading the new one, the one that is alive and well in the eyes of the children that we are borrowing the earth from. Let's lead with care. And not if, but when we do this, I would be absolutely honored to write a reference letter for the 2 reasons I believe in magic and miracles again, to work with any of you, my fellows in this great constellation of care, the greater many. Thank you. 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 Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you all so much. My friends in the AV, could we just go back?